Good Wednesday, everybody. It's good to see you today. I don't know about you, but I have enjoyed watching all the throwback sports over the last couple weeks on ESPN. There's no real sports happening right now in the world. I think there's a professional baseball league that's trying to get underway in Korea or something. But we're not going to have sports in America for the foreseeable future, at least. And so watching all the old stuff has been kind of fun. I love sports. One of the funny things that has come about for me is this idea of iRacing. Have you seen this? Where they put actual NASCAR drivers in on a computer with the steering wheel, with the gear shift, with the pedals, and they put monitors around them, and they actually race like they're in cars and like they're in actual cars. I know one of them the other day got in an accident, and he said, well, that was a whole lot easier than getting in a real accident. There's just not quite the stakes, that there are with other things. And we see basketball tournaments, e-player basketball tournaments, esports, electronic sports is becoming more and more of a thing. And that thrill of competition is being satiated in some ways for most Americans, but not in every way. It's just not the same. I wonder how far back that idea of competition goes and where the idea of humility fits in with it. Because as I got older as a coach and a player, I still have those tendencies. If I play one-on-one with someone in basketball, I want to win. And I still would reach back into those old tendencies to play as hard as I could and to try my best. But as I've aged, I've gotten a lot better with losing. And as a coach, I won so much and I lost so much that it was just kind of meted out in the middle somewhere for me. And I just didn't really mind anymore. I didn't really care. I didn't have that driving force to compete the way that I used to. For David, I wonder if it was an idea, if he ever wondered if he'd have to compete with Saul. And I don't think he did. I think Saul was so over the top with ruling and killing David that David didn't really desire to hurt Saul. We know he didn't, as a matter of fact, because in 1 Samuel chapter 24, verse 4, David is presented an opportunity to stab Saul in the back, but he does something else. It says in verse 4, David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Saul was in a cave. He was hunting David and his men. And he went into the cave to use the bathroom. And when he got in there in that dark place, he didn't realize that his adversary, his prey, was right there in the cave with him. And as he used the bathroom there in the cave, he thought in private, David's men were goading David. David, just go stab him in the back. Just go run him through with your sword. You'll be done with this. We can go home. David knew he was going to be the next king. He had already been anointed by Samuel in the garden of his father Jesse in Bethlehem. And yet, he didn't feel like it was his place to do for God what God was going to do himself. In other words, he wasn't going to run ahead of God. He was going to let his time be God's time. And so David goes up and he cuts the corner of Saul's robe just to show Saul that the Lord had delivered him into his hands, and yet David felt like it was a test. David felt like it was something that he wasn't supposed to do. Saul ends up finding out. Saul forgives David for a while and stops chasing him. And of course, we know that it all comes back. David could end everything. His idea of competition could have been so high, he could have just ended Saul. And I think most every man in history would have ended Saul in that cave and just quietly taken over the kingship. And yet David refused. One sword thrust, and David chose not to. David had something else in mind. I think he thought two things, okay? And stick with me here. Number one, a dishonorable victory isn't something a person of character longs for. And David was certainly high in character in these days. He was super high in character. Winning without honor isn't victory, David might say. Number two, David was in contact with God and knew God's will. David was content allowing the Lord to work His will in his life and in the life of everyday Israel. And David wasn't going to take the place of that. It's easy when things aren't working and the way we think they should to push God aside and take control ourselves. But David was high character, high trust. And we see the graph. Simon Sinek talks about it. Others talk about it, about how high character, high trust individuals, they're the ones that you want in charge. They're the ones that you want there as the leader. They want that. And they will take a character, a high character, medium trust over other things. In other words, you can drop the trust factors as long as the person has a character that you can lean on then they'll take that. Well, David was high character, high trust, at least in this respect, and at least at this time. Here, David resists taking control. In Matthew chapter 8, we see the story of a centurion. He approaches Jesus to ask him to heal his servant. I love this story because Jesus says immediately to this centurion, this Gentile centurion, this Roman guard, he looks at him and says, "Oh yeah, I'll come right now." And the centurion says, Whoa, I'm not worthy to have you come into my home. I'm not worthy to have you walk amongst me. I'm not worthy to walk with you down the road. Well, why don't you just say the word and my servant will be healed? That's how much faith the centurion had. He's not trying to boss Jesus around. He's trying to be humble. And Jesus recognizes that. You see, because in verse 8 of Matthew 8, the centurion calls Jesus rabbi. He calls him teacher. He calls him Lord. He says, "My Lord." Then he says, "I don't deserve to have you. Just say the word and it will be done." You see, humility, when we practice it, breeds honor. And we are a society that sometimes we see honor in it, but man, the honor that we see is very self-centered, isn't it? The reason the Hatfields and the McCoys fought for so many years is because of their family honor. We are a high honor society. Most of us who live in these areas, if you're Caucasian, you are of Scottish, Irish heritage, and the Scottish and the Irish are renowned for their high sense of honor and family and blood-bound oaths. The problem is that Jesus speaks of humility. And that humility breeds honor. Think of Jesus himself. Did Jesus humble himself? The Bible says he did. I'll read that to you to end today. But let me get back to this. David could have easily killed Saul and fast forwarded God's plan for Israel. But he chose not to because he trusted the Lord and he would not supersede what the Lord had done. The centurion could have demanded Jesus as a Jew to come to his house and work the miracle. He could have demanded that Jesus do that because he had the authority and the power to do so. But instead he humbled himself. He called Jesus Lord and he asked him to. Philippians chapter 2 verse 8 is where we'll end today. It says this about Jesus. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Today, this evening, as you sit around the table with your family, why don't you discuss with them honor? I want you to discuss with them humility and how they both have a part to play. And maybe today you can humble yourself and humble yourself and bow low to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Have a blessed day. I love you just the way you are.